Linear guides, anatomical guide, anatomical limits, origins, branches in relation to vein, mortuary science, to study for the national board exams, not safe for work or children. Anterior, aka ventral, same thing. Anterior ventral describes the front or direction toward the front of the body. The toes are anterior to the foot. The toes are towards the front, so anterior to the foot. Posterior, aka dorsal, same thing, describes the back or direction toward the back of the body. The popliteus is posterior to the patella. Popliteus is a fancy fuckface word for the muscle that's on the back inside of the knee. The patella is the fancy fuckface word for a kneecap. So the bullshit muscle that moves your knee from the inside of the bend of your knee, the popliteus, is posterior to the back of the kneecap, aka patella. Superior, aka cranial, same thing, describes a position above or higher than another part of the body proper. The eyes are superior to the mouth. Your head is superior to your ass. Inferior, aka caudal, describes a position below or lower than another part of the body proper, near or toward the tail. Humans don't have a fucking tail. But you know what? It's in here. So near or toward the tail might come up. Just pretend like we have a tail. The pelvis is inferior to the abdomen. Medial describes the middle or direction toward the middle of the body. Your bird finger is the medial finger. What might come up is the hallux is the medial toe. It's a fancy fuckface word for the middle toe. Medial. Lateral describes the side or direction toward the side of the body. The thumb, aka pollex, is lateral to the digits, aka other fingers. So, lateral toward the side of the body. So wiggle your big thumb. Remember, it's also called a pollex. Superficial describes a position closer to the surface of the body. The skin is superficial to the bones. Deep describes a position farther from the surface of the body. The brain is deep to the skull. Linear guide, a line drawn or visualized on the surface of the skin to represent the approximation location of some deep-lying structure. Anatomical guide, reference for location of arteries and veins by means of anatomical structures which are known. So remember, linear guide is the surface of the skin. Anatomical guide is beneath the skin. Anatomical limit, points of origin and termination in relation to adjacent structures used to designate boundaries of arteries. Linear guide for the common carotid artery. Visualize a line on the surface of the skin from a point over the respective sternoclavicular articulation to a point over the anterior surface of the base of the respective earlobes. What that's saying Sternoclavicular articulation is that little notch where the clavicle ends underneath the chin, and the bottom of the base of the earlobe on the same side. So you imagine putting a tool touching from that notch up to the earlobe, and you have the linear guide for the common carotid artery. Relationship of the common carotid artery to the internal jugular vein. The internal jugular vein lies lateral and superficial to the common carotid artery. So, the internal jugular vein lies lateral to the side and a little bit closer to the surface of the skin next to the carotid artery. The jugular lies to the side and a little bit further to the surface of the common carotid artery, which in fuckface language lies lateral and superficial. Linear guide for the axillary artery. Visualize a line on the surface of the skin from a point over or through the center of the base of the axillary space to a point over or through the center of the lateral border of the base of the axillary space, running parallel to the long axis of the abducted arm. The axillary space is a dumbass fancy word for the armpit space. So you imagine a triangle around the armpit. So, linear guide for the axillary artery. You visualize a line over or through the center of the base of the armpit to a point over or through the center or lateral. See, it says center of the lateral. So it's saying center of the side or direction towards the side of the body border of the base of the armpit, running parallel down the arm. So, linear guide for the axillary artery. Linear guide for the brachial artery. Visualize a line on the surface of the skin from a point over the center of the lateral border of the base of axillary space to a point approximately 1 inch below the front of the elbow joint. So, in normal language, visualize a line on the surface of the skin for the brachial artery from a point over the center side border of the base of the armpit to a point approximately 1 inch below the front of the elbow joint. So that point, it's very close to the axillary artery. You just have to remember the differences. The 1 inch below the front of the elbow joint, but they're both from the armpit or axillary space. Linear guide for the radial artery. Visualize a line on the surface of the skin of the forearm from the center of the antecubital fossa to the center of the base of the index finger. Antecubital fossa is a dumbass word for the depression of your elbow. Antecubital fossa is the indention, depression, or inside of your elbow. So the linear guide for the radial artery is a line on the surface of the skin on the forearm from the center of the inside of your elbow to the center of the base of the index finger is the radial artery. Linear guide for the ulnar artery. Visualize a line on the surface of the skin from the center of the antecubital fossa on the forearm to a point between the fourth and fifth fingers. So, in normal language, a line on the surface of the skin from the center of the inside of your elbow down to the point between your fourth and fifth finger. So the ulnar artery comes to between your fourth and fifth finger, the wedding and pinky. And the radial goes to your fuck you finger. Nope, that's not the fuck you finger. That is the pointer finger. Radial goes to the pointer finger, and ulnar goes between the pinky and the wedding finger. I wish it went to the fuck you finger. That would be great. But linear guide for the femoral artery. Visualize a line on the surface of the skin of the thigh from the center of the inguinal ligament to the center of the medial prominence of the knee. All right, so linear guide for the femoral artery. You're going to visualize a line on the surface of the skin of the thigh from the center of the inguinal ligament is where the sexy V is on the men that have great abs. That V that they get, the center of the sexy V to the center of the kneecap that sticks out, which the fancy name for that is condyle. So, linear guide for the femoral artery, center of the side of the sexy V, up on the thigh, where the thigh comes up, where that V is, down to the part of the knee that sticks out. If you were to take a metal rod and put it at the center of the V and then put it down to where the kneecap sticks out, that should be where the femoral runs in a perfect world. Anatomical guide for the common carotid artery. Posterior to the medial border of the sternocleidomastoid muscle. Anatomical guide for the carotid artery. Posterior to, which is to the back of the middle, or direction towards the middle of the sternocleidomastoid. So it is behind the sternocleidomastoid, in the middle of it. Anatomical guide for the axillary artery. Posterior to the medial border of the coracobrachialis muscle. The coracobrachialis muscle is that muscle that connects up under your armpit and runs down the inside of your arm under your armpit. That when your arm is next to your body, it's touching your rib cage from under your armpit. So the axillary artery is behind and in the middle border of your upper inner arm muscle that runs down from your armpit. Posterior to the medial border of the coracobrachialis bullshit. Inner arm bullshit. Coracobrachialis is inner arm from armpit muscle bullshit. And that is the anatomical guide for the axillary. Anatomical guide for the brachial artery lies in the bicipital groove at the posterior margin of the medial border of the belly of the biceps brachii muscle. So, anatomical guide for the brachial artery. It lies in the groove of your bicep at the back margin of the middle border of the belly of your bicep muscle. So it is basically the brachial artery is sort of behind the bicep. Anatomical guide for the radial artery lies lateral to the tendon of the flexor carpiradialis muscle and just medial to the tendon of the brachioradialis muscle. So, anatomical guide for the radial artery lies to the side of the tendon of the flexor carpiradialis muscle. This is the carpiradialis muscle. It's located on the side of the forearm, and it originates from the bony part of the humerus and goes down the arm. This is the brachioradialis. So the brachioradialis is the muscle in the forearm that starts at the side epicondyle of the humerus upper arm bone and inserts into the radius forearm bone. The brachioradialis flexes at the elbow joint, bringing the forearm towards the upper arm. So just remember, the brachioradialis forms the side of the inner elbow joint. The inner elbow is the cubital fossa. So, therefore, the anatomical guide for the radial artery is the radial artery lies to the side of the tendon of the flexor carpiradialis forearm muscle to the center of the tendon of the brachioradialis muscle, which is the inner forearm muscle tendon that runs below the elbow joint. So this is all the radial artery runs to the side of these tendons of the inner elbow that runs down your lower inner forearm. Radial artery, inner forearm. Inner forearm, carpiradialis and brachioradialis bullshit of the cubital fucking fossa. Inner elbow, inner arm, radial. Anatomical guide for the ulnar artery lies lateral to the tendon of the flexor carpi ulnaris muscle. Lies between the tendons of the flexor carpi ulnaris and flexor digitorum superficialis. An easier way to remember these anatomical guides: radial artery, carpi radialis, brachioradialis. Ulnar artery, carpi ulnaris, flexor carpi ulnaris, flexor digitorum. So again, radial, carpi radialis, brachioradialis. Ulnar, carpi ulnaris, flexor digitorum superficialis. The flexor carpi ulnaris is the inner pinky side of the forearm and flexes and bends the wrist and moves it towards the pinky side. So, anatomical guide for ulnar artery. Ulnar, carpi ulnaris, muscle running to the pinky. Ulnar artery. It runs down the side of the tendon, down the muscle, the tendon of the muscle that moves your wrist towards the pinky. Anatomical guide for the femoral artery. Passes through the femoral triangle and is bounded laterally by the sartorius muscle and medially by the adductor longus muscle. So remember, anatomical guide for the femoral artery. Passes through femoral triangle, laterally by sartorius, medially by adductor longus. Femoral triangle, laterally by sartorius, medially by adductor longus. Again, femoral artery, femoral triangle, laterally by sartorius, medially by adductor longus. Anatomical limit for the right common carotid artery begins at the level of the right sternoclavicular articulation and extends to the superior border of the thyroid cartilage. So anatomical limit, right common carotid, level of right sternoclavicular articulation, extends superior border of thyroid cartilage. Anatomical limit for the left common carotid artery begins at the level of the second costal cartilage and extends to the superior border of the thyroid cartilage. So, right common carotid, right sternoclavicular, superior border of thyroid. Left common carotid, second costal cartilage and extends to the superior border of the thyroid cartilage. So, left second costal cartilage, left second costal cartilage, superior border of thyroid cartilage. Right common carotid artery, right sternoclavicular articulation, superior border of thyroid cartilage. They both go to the superior border of the thyroid cartilage. The difference is the right is the right sternoclavicular articulation, the left is level of second costal cartilage. So just remember that the left side is the bullshit side with the stupid fucking word. Whatever the fuck second costal cartilage is. You know what? Let's find out. The second costal cartilage is the fancy bullshit word for the cartilage that connects the second rib to the sternum. So costal cartilage is just the cartilage in between the second rib and the sternum. So the anatomical limit for the left common carotid begins where the cartilage that connects the second rib to the breastbone is, which is kind of fucking weird, which I guess that's why it's on the left side, you know. So, right common carotid, right sternoclavicular articulation, right? That's what makes sense, right? Right there at the clavicle to the thyroid for the right. For the left, it's on some bullshit and it begins down there at the second fucking rib bone where it connects to the breastbone. And then still goes up to the thyroid. So we're like a little weird there on the left. Left common carotid artery begins at the second rib bone cartilage, or costal cartilage. Anatomical limit for the axillary artery. Anatomical limit for the axillary artery begins at the lateral border of the first rib to the inferior border of the tendon of teres major muscle. The teres major is the muscle that originates from the bottom angle of the shoulder blade and inserts into the upper arm bone. It's a muscle of the upper back and shoulder region. It extends, adducts, and rotates the arm. So it kind of comes around under the armpit from the scapula or shoulder blade into the upper arm bone. So it's kind of near the armpit. That's the teres major that this is talking about. So the teres major is kind of like an armpit muscle from the scapula to the upper arm bone, and the anatomical limit for the axillary artery, which of course the axillary is all about the armpit, begins at the side border of the first rib to the bottom border of the tendon of this shoulder blade under armpit to top of bone teres major muscle. That is the anatomical limit. Begins at the lateral border of the first rib to the inferior border of the tendon of teres major muscle. Anatomical limit for the brachial artery begins at the inferior border of the tendon of teres major muscle. So same bullshit as the axillary, because the axillary and the brachial are damn near right on top of each other. You know, they might as well just tie their dicks together and get married. The axillary and the brachial. Let me digress. Begins at the inferior border, the brachial begins at the inferior border of the tendon of teres major muscle to a point inferior to the antecubital fossa, which, remember, antecubital fossa is the fuckface word for the inside of the elbow. So, the brachial artery begins at the bottom border of this teres major tendon of the muscle goes down to inferior to the antecubital fossa, so it goes down below the depression of the elbow. The axillary is the first rib only to the inferior border of this shoulder blade armpit bullshit teres major muscle. The anatomical limit for the brachial goes all the way down below the antecubital fossa depression of the elbow spot. So brachial runs down further. The anatomical limit for the brachial artery runs down much further in the arm than the axillary artery anatomical limit. One stays up, the axillary stays up near the armpit. The brachial runs near it but down below the depression of the elbow, antecubital fossa. Anatomical limit for the radial artery begins 1 inch inferior and anterior to the bend of the elbow, antecubital fossa, to a point over the base of the thumb. It's funny how in the definitions, they just like randomly decide to use the English language instead of the Latin bullshit. Anyway, anatomical limit for the radial artery begins 1 inch below and in front of the bend of the elbow. I don't know how it is in front of the bend of the elbow, but that's what it says. Below and towards the front of the body from the bend of the elbow to a point over the base of the thumb. Radial goes to the base of the thumb. Starts 1 inch in inferior and anterior, below and to the front of the bend of the elbow. Anatomical limit for the ulnar artery begins 1 inch inferior and anterior to the bend of the elbow, antecubital fossa, to a point over the pisiform bone. Pisiform. Pisiform. Either way. So, the pisiform bone is a tiny little piss-poor, pissant bullshit excuse for a pea-shaped, little teeny tiny bone located on the ulnar side of the wrist, which is the little finger, the pinky finger, embedded with the flexor carpi ulnaris tendon. Anatomical limit for the femoral artery begins posterior to the center of the inguinal ligament, which remember is the V, to the opening in the adductor magnus muscle. Anatomical limit for the femoral artery, posterior to center, which they might also say posterior and medial of the inguinal ligament, to the opening in the adductor magnus muscle. Origin for the right common carotid artery, terminal branch for the brachiocephalic artery. Origin of right common carotid, terminal branch of brachiocephalic artery. Origin for left common carotid artery, branches off of arch of aorta. So, origin, right carotid, brachiocephalic. Left common carotid, arch of aorta. Right brachiocephalic, left arch of aorta. Right brachiocephalic, left arch of aorta. Origin for axillary artery, continuation of subclavian artery. Axillary, armpit, continuation of subclavian artery. So remember, armpit, clavicle, axillary, armpit, continuation of subclavian, clavicle. Axillary, continuation of subclavian artery. Origin for the brachial artery, continuation of the axillary artery, because the brachial artery, remember, goes down past the antecubital fossa, bullshit, depression of the elbow. So it continues from the axillary artery, continues from the armpit artery. a continuation of the armpit artery. Origin for the radial artery, bifurcation of the brachial. So the brachial turns into the radial. It goes axillary, brachial, radial. Origin for the radial artery is bifurcation of the brachial. Origin for the ulnar artery, bifurcation of the brachial artery. So, the origin for the radial and the origin for the ulnar are both bifurcation of the brachial. Because remember, the ulnar is the pinky, the radial goes down into between the pinky and the wedding finger. They both come from the antecubital fossa or whatever. They go down there. So, axillary, brachial, and then radial and ulnar come off of that. Origin for the femoral artery. It's a continuation of the external iliac. External iliac. Not common or whatever other bullshit they want to throw in there. External iliac. Origin for the femoral artery is a continuation of the external iliac artery. Branches for the right common carotid artery. Terminal bifurcation into the right internal and external carotid arteries. So the branches for the right common carotid artery is the bifurcation, the split into the right internal and external carotid arteries. That's the right and right, internal and external. Branches for the left common carotid artery is the terminal bifurcation into the left internal and external carotid arteries. So that's pretty easy to remember with the branches. Right goes with right splits, left goes with left splits, internal and external splits. Relation of the axillary artery to the axillary vein. The axillary artery is located lateral and deep to the axillary vein. So, the axillary artery is located to the side and deeper to the vein. Side and deeper. The armpit bullshit. The artery in the vein, the fucking artery is to the side and deeper, so the vein's on top. When you're digging in the bullshit, you will see the vein first, and then if you dig a little deeper into the side, you'll get the axillary artery. The artery is to the side and deeper in the armpit. Relation of the brachial artery to the basilic vein. The accompanying basilica vein is located medial and superficial to the brachial artery. So the vein is to the center and to the surface of the brachial artery. So when you're digging for the brachial artery, you'll hit the vein first, and then the artery will be right underneath it. Brachial artery is right underneath and below the vein. Axillary is right to the side and deeper. Yeah. The way this is worded is absolute bullshit. The axillary artery is to the side and deeper than the vein. The brachial artery is also deeper, but in the center. But the way they'll say it is the vein is to the center and superficial. So you have to visualize this and pay attention to whether they're wanting you to map quest from the fucking vein or map quest from the fucking artery. You're either starting from one and going deeper, or you're starting from one and going to the surface. They mix the bullshit up. So it's probably a good idea to draw these two to remember the difference between the axillary artery and the vein from the brachial artery and the basilic vein. Relation of the radial artery to the vena comitantes. Relation of the radial artery to the vena comitantes. Two small veins lie on either side of the artery, which I'm assuming is the two small veins on either side of the radial artery are called the vena comitantes. You know, because it can't just be the fucking, the twins or something simple like that. It's got to be some kind of fucking vena comitantes bullshit. That doesn't even sound Latin. That sounds Spanish. So, two small veins lie on either side of the radial artery. May be helpful in locating the radial artery because they generally contain some blood. So, the radial artery has twins, and the twins are called the vena comitantes. Relation of the femoral artery to the femoral vein. The femoral artery lies lateral and superficial to the femoral vein. So, when it comes to the femoral, unlike the others, the artery is to the side and on top of the vein. The femoral artery is to the side and more to the surface of the vein. So you have to dig down deeper to the side to get the femoral vein. Considerations for the common carotid artery. Very large in diameter, very elastic, very rarely found, sclerotic, supplies fluid directly to the head, situated close to the center of fluid distribution, and is accompanied by a very large vein. Disadvantages to using the common carotid artery. Incision may be visible after dressing. Face can be over-injected. Dye may not be evenly distributed in the face, and positioning of tubes against the face may leave marks. Considerations for the axillary and brachial arteries, because you know both of them have to do with the armpit. Arterial fluid flows directly into arm and hand. Artery is close to the face. Vessels are superficial and close to the center of fluid distribution. So those are considerations. Arterial fluid flows directly into arm and hand. Artery is close to the face. Vessels are superficial and close to the center of fluid distribution. Considerations for the femoral artery. The artery is large in size. The incision is not visible. Both sides of the head will receive an even distribution of solution, and the femoral is accompanied by a large vein that can be used for drainage, just like how the carotid's accompanied by a large vein that's good used for drainage. Disadvantages to using the axillary and brachial arteries. The arm must be extended, especially if the vein is to be used for drainage. The artery is too small to be used as a primary injection site. The artery can look like a vein, and there are many anomalies and numerous branches in the armpit, axillary brachial. that is it for this one. I hope that this was helpful. This was an absolute bitch to make because where I'm making it, it's like 100 degrees. There's no air conditioning here. And Quizlet is a piece of shit. Quizlet is an absolute fucking piece of shit. It is constantly crashing. I'm curious to know if it constantly crashes on other people, especially when they're trying to do something semi-important. I'm very grateful for Quizlet. Because without Quizlet and us being able to use it to help each other, with the way this material is gate kept, we'd really all be fucked. Because it's not like anyone really wants to actually teach this bullshit and actually prepare us for the boards, you know, of any professional stature. If you have a professor that does, you are blessed. The rest of us have to figure this shit out for ourselves. And Quizlet is an enormous blessing, but fucking hell, it crashes a lot. So the whole entire time I was making this, it was crashing on me and I was having to pause and record a lot. So I hope it's not too choppy, and good luck.